the people I met that are successful are like, I don't know, but based on what we're preparing for, this is where we think we'll be at. If we're not there at the halfway point, we may readjust. Those are informed decisions. Those are where mistakes are corrected quickly and long-term plans can be adjusted.
Welcome to the My Future Business Show, where we get you in front of your best audience and keep you there. Not only are we interviewing the biggest names in business to help you become even more successful, we're inviting you to book your spot on the show to help you grow your business. So at the end of the call, make sure you fill in the interview application form at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. Hi and welcome back to the My Future Business Show. My name's Rick Nuske. I'm the host and I'm also the luckiest person in the world to have you with us today on the call. For everybody who's provided feedback, it's wonderful. It just shows so much how the My Future Business Show is making a difference for you. So thank you very much. Now on today's call, I'm with CASSMER WARD. How are you, CASSMER?
Good. How are you doing, Rick?
I'm fantastic. I've got 2 feet and a heartbeat. I like to say I cannot complain right now. How about your good self?
Same here. So practicing social distancing and hoping to flatten the curve.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yes, this curve that we all hear about, it's omnipresent at the moment, isn't it?
Yep.
So where are you actually located, CASSMER?
I'm located in Charlotte, North Carolina in the United States.
Fantastic. It's wonderful to have you on the call with us today. And for everybody who's with us, we're going to be talking about CASSMER's book, How Much Does It Cost to Make a Donut? But we're going to look a little deeper into this because just prior to the call, in fact, CASSMER and I were talking a little bit about my own personal journey looking into purchasing a donut shop. So it's quite interesting that how the stars align, I guess. Now, before we jump into the details, CASSMER, what I like to do is get my guests to share a little bit about themselves with the My Future Business audience. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background, where you are, and what you like to do when you're not working?
Sure. Yeah. So long story short, I many moons ago, I was at the university getting my degree in accounting.
Mm-hmm.
And right about 4 years in, when I was about to get my degree, I realized one thing, and that was that I was not ready to go work and get a job. So I stayed in college an extra year. I got a degree in management information systems and English. And if money wasn't an object, I probably would have just stayed in college and got every degree possible. But
A perpetual student.
Exactly. But life just does not work out that way. So I actually had to go out and get a job.
Bugger.
And from there, I started my world in the accounting world in corporate America.
Mm-hmm.
And I just did not fit in well. I spent several years, 4 years working for a large corporation in banking, actually. And I had a good experience, but what I really wanted to know was how can I make a difference? If I have an idea that would work out and make the company better, let's implement it. And that's just not how corporate America worked. And it wasn't that corporate wasn't a fit for me. I probably was not a fit for corporate America. So I ended up working for a small private company that as soon as I took the job, I did not realize the company was close to going bankrupt. And I left this big lofty job in corporate America to start looking for another job because I didn't know if the company I was working for would be around in 2 months. But while I started looking for work, I started working with the managers there to figure out how we could not lose money. That was the goal, not to grow, not to be extremely profitable, how to not lose money. And as I started working with the managers, we found a way to not lose money and eventually make money. And we grew that company. It was a construction and engineering firm, grew it from 1 million to 2 million to 5 million to 7 million, eventually to a $25 million company. And then it became corporate again.
That's funny, that.
So after I left there, I realized I was going to take some time, and shortly thereafter, some employees left the same company and said, start up an engineering firm. So I started that company, ran that for a while. I still have ownership. I'm still their chief financial officers, but they didn't need me 40 hours a week. So I figured, why not try some other things? And from there, I really been in a startup world and spent a lot of time as a fractional CFO, but I've worked, I've started and owned a donut company, a medical device company. I've worked in shoe and sock companies and everything in between.
And I guess that a wide range of experiences I guess serves as a well-rounded person to go to for these types of things, because I guess every business is slightly different, isn't it?
Well, the thing is, every industry is completely different. But what
Hmm.
happens, whether it's in marketing or strategy or management, and especially accounting, all of the concepts are the same.
Yeah.
And people get boxed in nowadays to where, um, Rick, you end up being in the shoe business for so long. People say, well, you'll only be able to be in that industry, whether you're a marketer or a designer, whatever it is. But really, you have a lot of transferable skills that, you could just as well be running a donut shop.
Yes, absolutely. Now, at what point did you recognize that there was a book inside of you, and what was, I guess, that moment in time that you recognized that you were going to write it?
Well, I think we all say, probably even back going to grade school, one day I'm going to write a book, because that's what, I want to be an author. And probably about 10 years ago, I started to write a book about, some life stories and things like that. And it just, honestly, it got too heavy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I was like, God, I don't know if I've got this in me, and I don't know if this is healthy for me. So I kind of put writing to the side, and I went on working, and I actually ended up, I was teaching managerial accounting in the master's program at Queen's University,
Hmm.
and had been teaching it for a few years. But around my second or third year of teaching, I helped a partner open and start a donut business. And it started as a gourmet food truck. It then went from there to becoming a shop, and there were a couple other shops. We eventually, built the company up and then sold it off. But what happened in my classroom was, there was one nagging question that came up over and over between me and my partner, and it was accounting based. It was, how much does it cost to make a donut? And we argued, and every year we had more and more experience making donuts, and we still could never agree on it. And my curriculum slowly took form of me venting my complaints with my partner about how much does it cost to make a donut. We used weekly accounting concepts that we were covering in class to do so. And that became my curriculum. So when it became time to write the book, the really question was, well, if I'm going to write a book, let's write the easy one first, the one I talk about day after day, 3 times a year in the class I teach. And I really just sat down and wrote the book over a couple months.
So it just came naturally because you obviously had all of this content oozing out of you.
Yes. And really, here's the bigger concept. Well, the title is, how much does it cost to make a donut? The bigger concept I confront is, most people hate accounting. It's just not fun.
Mm.
It's,
It's not glamorous.
it's not glamorous. There's a stereotype to every type of accountant that's out there. And I know in my class that nobody's taking my class to become an accountant. And I really wanted to give the goal was, let me teach you 7 accounting concepts that
Hmm.
will allow you to not be an accountant, but at least to make sure you're asking the right questions. And I reinforced all those concepts with the story of the startup of a donut company, and then reinforce those concepts with all kinds of entrepreneurial stories across all industries, just to drive it home on how we make decisions and how we make assumptions.
Thank you for sharing. I'd love to know, Cassmer, if we could deep dive into some elements of the book, just so we can get a bit of a flavour for the types of stories that we can find inside. Are we able to do that?
Oh, definitely. Wherever you'd like me to start.
Oh, look, in terms of the structure, you mentioned that there's like it's a story based. Now, um,
Yeah.
what are one of the stories that is most predominant in your mind that you'll find in the book?
One of the bigger the bigger stories, or the concepts we get, and you get probably get about 2/3 through the book, is, this happens in corporate America. This happens in, every small business there is. You gather all the information that you need. You make assumptions. You do your research. You have everything in front of you, and you come up with the number you're looking for, whether you like it or not. And what happens is, you don't make a decision. People just like not making a decision. And there is a running theme throughout the book that my partner and I, when we were looking at starting this company, had all of the information we needed, but we just couldn't make a decision to go forward or not. We're like, well, this is the information. And from there, I talk into, I delve into some stories, everything from family related to business related. And one of my favorite stories I always like to talk about, which is both a negative and positive story,
Hmm.
is something similar with my grandmother. My grandmother loved to use a VCR, and this is only 5 years ago. She liked to videotape her soap operas every single days.
Yep.
Every morning she got up. I mean, to go through the menu, it took her 30 minutes to set this thing up, and it drove me nuts. So one year I bought her a TiVo, and I said, listen, this is what I do for a living. I'm going to take 30 minutes out of your day, give that back to you. You literally are going to point at the screen, click on your show, and it records it. You never have to do anything ever again. I spent 20 minutes setting it up. I tried to show her how to point and click, and she said, no, I don't like it. This is too hard.
Oh.
And it wasn't too hard, but it wasn't what she wanted. So I ended up, after all that work, unhooked the TiVo, hooked the VCR back up, and never saw such a great sigh of relief
Yes.
that, like, okay, things are back to normal. Okay. So she made that decision. Whether I agree with it or not is not the case.
Hmm.
But let's talk about another argument I had with myself, that I couldn't make a decision. For years, I complained month after month that I got a bill in the mail for my cable for $180 a month. And I was like, I barely watch TV. I only watch 5 TV shows over and over and over again. I complained every single month. I built a spreadsheet. I sat down with my boys. I said, what shows do we like? What streaming service do we went over and over again about what it would take for us to get rid of cable but not miss a thing. After a couple hours working with my son, that became a nice little family project and mathematical exercise. We figured we could get everything we wanted for $60 a month. Save $120 a month.
A month. Wow, that's big bucks.
Exactly. So I did what I do well. I did nothing. I made no decision. I just got mad the next month when it came in. And it came up over and over again. I couldn't make the decision like my grandmother did, whether it was right or wrong, until eventually this came up. One of my students in my class asked me about a TV show, and I mentioned something about still having cable, and they were like, you still do cable? And I'm like, well, I've been through the exercise. I just haven't done it. We ended up doing the exercise as an accounting problem in our classroom. The students loved it. They were like, yeah, you'd save $120. So are you going to do it? And I kind of didn't answer them because I knew I wasn't.
Yeah.
And they're like, but they wouldn't let it go. They wanted me to actually say, no, I'm not going to do it. Until one of the students said, well, don't you want an extra $120 a month? And of course I did, but I was still not making a decision. I was still doing nothing. And then one student spoke up and said, if I had an extra $120 a month, I'd get a maid. And all I could think of is, oh my gosh, I would really, really like a maid.
Yes.
And as we started, and I was like, can you get a maid for $120? They're like, yeah, they might come twice a month for that amount. And once that clicked, that it wasn't about the $120, it was about the convenience, and it was about me doing something different. Once I found additional convenience, I actually made a decision. I went home that day, canceled cable, got the streaming service, haven't looked back twice. The biggest complaint about all of it is I couldn't wonder why I didn't do it 2 years earlier.
Yes, and that you were compelled to make that decision once you recognized that there was a better opportunity in front of you. And I suspect this is how the book is helping people, is to recognize that, staying stagnant and just working within the confines of the numbers that you have might actually be, I guess, curtailing your ability to grow.
Exactly. So those are personal stories I share. I also share a story of a project I worked on for a client that helped them track expenses that employers were using for their company cards. I found a way that it would take a 1 month process, get it down into 1 day. It would reconcile everything. And all that would happen is that all of the employees with credit cards would have to turn in their receipts.
Yep.
Common business practice. It would save the company roughly $130,000 a year. I was very proud. The fee I was making for that month of work was a fraction of that. And they would save that $130,000 a year every single year.
Yeah.
Well, when we talked to the first employee about having to turn in their receipts, they didn't like it. They're like, yeah, I don't know if I want to do that. And we're like, well, that's not your money. It's company money. And they're like, I know, but it's just a huge hassle. And the manager didn't want to deal with the employees. He was willing to forego $130,000 a year to not have a headache, to not have a hard conversation with his employees.
Wow.
I would say he didn't make a decision, but the worst thing is he made a decision to not be inconvenienced.
Yeah, that's amazing, isn't it? It's one thing to make a decision, but one that is negative towards the outcomes of the business, that's even worse, isn't it?
Right. And it's one of those things, if he would have found what his made was that he could have gotten with it, with that difference, he probably would have made a much different decision. If it was tied to his bonus, I bet that program would have gone in 2 hours.
It's funny, yeah. You've mentioned some pretty important things there. If we can link it back to a bigger goal or another opportunity, or actually what you've just said then is personal responsibility and growth might be another trigger to drive decision making. Now, over your time doing all of this type of work, has your book actually resulted in people going, light bulb moment, we need to actually start making decisions?
Well, the book was just released 10 days ago.
Right.
So
it's fairly fresh off the blocks.
The book itself is fresh off the blocks, but here's where I might pat myself on the shoulder. Is it comes straight from my class. And I teach a class for an entire semester, but there are 5 to 7 concepts that I tell them. If I see you in 10 years from now, you better still know this concept and be able to apply it.
I'm coming for you.
I still from students I had, 8 years ago will still email me, text me, call me. I literally just did this today. It was like I was back in the classroom again, but it came back second nature.
Fantastic.
And I would rather do that and have something that stays with them. I took history every year for 4 years in high school. I can't tell you one thing about history. I just, there was the Civil War, there was World War I and World War II. I'll be honest, still not sure what started any of them, but I never took those concepts forward.
Yeah.
If I wish there was at least 3 things from each of those classes I could have brought and still talk to you about today, Rick.
Yes. Yep.
So I try to run my class and my book and everything in the same manner.
Yep.
You don't need to be an expert. I don't want to show you how smart I am, which is not very smart at all. But if I can share knowledge that is useful to me and you use it, Rick, it's well worth it.
Absolutely, and there's some sage advice for everybody's on the call today, CASSMER. Now, I'd love to dovetail this in with your experience as an entrepreneur yourself and how you intertwine the concepts behind accounting and entrepreneurialism, because at the end of the day, the My Future Business audience are startup entrepreneurs and small to medium-sized business owners that would take a lot of value from your feedback. Would you mind sharing a little bit about entrepreneurialism with them?
Yes. Here's my standard line is I'm an accountant by trade. Anybody that came to me that said, hey, I want to start up their own business, I would tell them, nope, it's not worth it. There's too much risk. And I guarantee you the reward just may not be what you think.
Yeah.
I've done it 5 to 6 times. So therefore I'm a huge hypocrite. And there's something about it that just keeps drawing me into it. There are things that I love about it. But part of the problem that I battle, and I'm sure a lot of your audience battles with too, is there are people that make entrepreneurship seem so sexy. There are these commercials of, I own my own business. I started today and now I live in this mansion, or now I have this boat, or now I have this fancy car. It is not like that at all. And if that does happen, it takes 10 to 20 years to do so.
Yeah.
There's no overnight success. Every actor, musician, business person that had overnight success, that night probably lasted 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, just to get to that point. Now, do you
Right.
actually talk about this concepts behind entrepreneurialism in your classes?
Yes. Yeah, I teach entrepreneurship,
Mm-hmm.
and what happened was when I started my first business, I based it. My teachings are based on my very early experience.
Mm-hmm.
I started an engineering company, and at the same time started raising capital for a medical device company. So I've got two businesses running concurrently that I'm starting up. And again, as an accountant, I'm about to have a breakdown. And I meet with someone like you, Rick, and you tell me, hey, Cass, you need to meet with Janet, and then I meet with Janet, and Janet says you need to meet with Dave, and I meet with these people, and very early on, I'm like, what do you want from me? What are you trying to sell me?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I have no money to give you, and I realized they're just other entrepreneurs that made mistakes along the way. They had other people that helped them, and they just want to see other people succeed.
Yes.
And I really started that foundation because early on, it was a very foreign concept to me. And now I spend a majority of my time helping anybody who wants to talk about business, whether they're a potential client or there's somebody that I could build a relationship that maybe in 10 years they're like, you know what, because you told me your top 5 mistakes, I avoided those and I was so much further along when I started my business.
Yeah, there seems to be,
So
sorry, there seems
go
to be
ahead.
this value first proposition that you're starting to live by, or at least have been living by.
It really is. I realize that so many people help me that I can do nothing but pay it forward.
Yeah.
And in doing that, I built my entrepreneurship class. So I've been teaching entrepreneurship just as long as I've been teaching managerial accounting. And some of the things that came up was, I can cover all the concepts: marketing, accounting, building your financial model, what operations, building a strategy, mission statements, all that I could cover. And honestly, anything I talk about there probably is no different than any entrepreneurship textbook you can get. I'm not special in that
Mm-hmm.
manner. However, a lot of my industry experience, people love real world examples. They love
Yes.
to hear about that. And one of the things they loved the most was when I brought other entrepreneurs into the classroom and they told their stories. And whether it was a tech company, whether it was a brand new startup.
Mm-hmm.
I once had a husband-wife couple come in that owned a restaurant. They started a restaurant together. They brought in food. They told their story. They fought with each other. They made up. They argued some more.
Yep.
And my students, I mean, they still, when I see them talk about it, they felt not only did they learn how a restaurant run, they felt like they were actually there in the kitchen with them running the business based on their personalities. And I mean, honestly, their restaurant's still there. I go all the time. And that's the kind of experience people want to see with entrepreneurs.
It's a humanistic thing, isn't it? I think you've hit the nail on the head, because when you talked about your book, you talked about it's I guess a consolidation of real life entrepreneurial stories and journeys. That's really the essence, isn't it?
It is. And not only that, so I teach entrepreneurship, and those stories were so great that I started recording them and turning them into a slight web series called Influencing Entrepreneurs.
Mm-hmm.
And really just, I gave that away to not, I use it in my classroom first, and after my class is over, I release them. But it's just, we learn most from other entrepreneurs. Like, let's just hear their stories. If you watch one of the so many episodes I've put up there, here's some of the mistakes. Here's some of the lessons you learned. If you can apply them, you're that much further along in the game.
Yeah. Absolutely. This is wonderful feedback. I really appreciate you sharing. Now, I know that there are different personality types. Different types of people learn different ways. Do stories communicate effectively for different types of personalities?
They do. I mean, a lot of people want something they can relate it to. And I'm going to go back to my story. People need to understand what their mate is. What is going to make the difference? They had the answer in front of them all along, but when you relate that to getting the services of a maid,
Yeah.
things differ a lot.
Yeah.
Um, it's hard because nobody likes to be wrong. If you can accept that you don't know, that you don't have the answers, that you have some research, that you have some historical information, that you're making assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
If you can acknowledge that you have that and you're going to make your best assumption to make a decision and identify what's the worst that could happen based on that, you're further along. You don't have an answer. You don't have the answer,
Yeah.
but you've made an informed decision. I run into a lot of personalities that they know everything. Oh, no, no. My uncle did this. I know how it is. This is how it's going to be. Oh, no, no, no. We'll have customers by the third month. Oh, we'll be break even by that. Well, how do you know that? Oh, you don't worry about that part. I just know.
I've got a crystal ball.
Exactly. I've never met anybody that just knows.
Yeah,
the people I met that are successful are like, I don't know, but based on what we're preparing for, this is where we think we'll be at. If we're not there at the halfway point, we may readjust. Those are informed decisions. Those are where mistakes are corrected quickly and long-term plans can be adjusted.
Yes, thank you. I'm looking through your bio here, and the thing that's stuck out for me is that how aspiring business owners learn how to make decisions using accounting without doing any accounting. Is this tied back to the story? Is this what's the trigger for these people not being accountants but actually crunching the numbers per se?
So what's happening is when you learn about a value proposition in the book, you probably will never use the term value proposition again, but you might say, I want to get it made.
Yeah.
So we reinforce these concepts with 20 different types of examples like that to teach accounting concepts with fables, with stories.
Yeah.
And they're not fables that they're made up. They're real life examples of things that have happened. And I gave you 2 examples of stories that happened that were anecdotally with my grandmother and me and my kids with cable. But there are plenty with construction companies and medical device companies and everything in between.
Yes, absolutely. Now, is it a book that you would pick up from and read from cover to cover, or is it more like a guide that you could step back into now and then?
I would say it's a short book. It's about 160 pages. Mm-hmm. So it would probably read much more like a storybook. So you probably would not look at it like a textbook to say, okay, I really want to learn how to do a budget. Let's go to the budget chapter.
Right.
Everything builds upon one another. And that's really how the concept, any one concept probably could be memorized and hopefully applied at some point in the future. But the way I go through it, every concept builds on the next. So more than likely, if you got one, you've got all of them.
You've got all of them. Yeah.
And they're simple enough to grasp.
Yeah. Thank you. I know that a lot of up-and-coming entrepreneurs, those who are not established, are certainly not accountants, but they've got a great idea, and they know very little about accounting. Let's start from that point. What are the foundational pieces that they should be considering as they move forward with their business idea before they actually start selling widgets?
Well, if we want to keep this to the accounting standpoint, it's understanding what accounting is. Very early in the book, I draw a definitive line that accountants and accounting is nothing but scorekeeping. That's all it is. It's gathering all the data, all the performance from the business, and putting it on the scoreboard. Now, it doesn't sound too complicated, but people say, oh, I get it right away, but then they don't realize there's several different types of accounting. So what happens is there's financial accounting. That's everything that we've learned in our accounting classes in undergraduate university.
Yeah.
And it is income statement, balance sheet. Then the goal there, as with any financial statement, is to make as much profit as possible. We want to be rich, right, Rick?
Yeah, we want more coming in than going out.
Right. So then what happens is there's also tax accounting. Well, tax accounting, we actually want to show that we made as little money as possible.
It's reversed.
And what happens is so many people go to their tax accountant first and they have them set up their books. They have them set up their accounting structure.
Yeah.
Well, their whole goal is to show that you made as little money as possible. So you're already at a point where you're not comfortable with accounting, you've already got a skewed point.
Yeah.
Now, let's say they get it right and they set up your income statement and your balance sheet correctly. There's a part there that, look at any publicly traded company, Apple or GM, anything, GE. We can look at their financial statements, but we still really have no idea how they run their business. And that's where this book kind of plays the role to say, let's not forget managerial accounting. Managerial accounting is gathering the information and arranging it in a way that we can make decisions. So instead of looking at what our total revenue is, let's look at what our revenue is per product type, per widget type. Yeah. And then what is our cost per widget? And how do we want to organize that information to make decisions rather than to say, oh, yes, we're profitable, or oh, no, we lost money.
Yes, yes. And there are, and it would be very easy for a sole proprietor coming into this, just hearing that, to go, you know what, I'm already overwhelmed just with that, that cursory level of introduction. How do they simplify it? Do you recommend that they get external help straight away? What's the smart thing to do there?
I'm going to be honest. I would say I feel if you have no background in accounting, nor especially if you don't like it, find external help to help you. So many entrepreneurs, you take the plumber that ends up leaving the plumbing company he's working for because he wants to start his own business. He realizes they're paying him $60,000 a year, but they're billing his services out for $120,000 a year.
Yeah.
Well, he starts his own company. He does his own accounting. He does his own marketing. He does all of this stuff. Before he knows it, he's 25 hours into the work week.
Yeah.
Now, if he, at that point, even if he bills at the same rate the company he worked for before him is at, he can't even make the $60,000 that he wanted to in the first place.
Yeah.
So he would be much better off working as much of that 40 hours as he could and finding services that are economical, to do those tasks for and run the business. But it's hard giving up that control. And it does take a little bit of investment, especially if revenue takes a month or two.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I also wonder about technology as it applies to accounting. A lot of people do fly solo, and there's all these wonderful pieces of software out there that you can access and use to manage all these different elements of accounting. What's your take on doing that by yourself, using that technology?
That technology, there's a lot of great technology, but not understanding how you want your information organized is a big piece of that. And usually one of the first things I do with any client is I'm like, why don't you draw the financial statement you want on the back of this napkin, and let's arrange the data so it spits it out in that manner. And doing that early on is so much easier than trying to go back and restate previous periods.
Yeah.
And when you give them the out-of-the-box statements that come in a lot of this software, it really kind of is the bane of my existence being accounting. And early in my career, it was hard.
Yeah.
Is I would hear that these numbers are wrong. And I would go back and I would work the numbers over and over again. And I'd give it, the reports again. These numbers are wrong. And it took me many years to realize, oh, wait, no, the numbers aren't wrong. They just don't like them. And they don't know what to, right. And they don't know what to do with them either. Yeah. And when I started looking at how can we build this to where the numbers don't change, but they're organized in a way that you can now make sense of them, then people were starting to make real life business decisions.
So when they say the numbers that they don't like, is there ever a time where you can shift numbers around so that it meets a picture of their expectation?
No, that's the yes and no.
Okay.
I can't make a company that's losing money rearrange the numbers to where they're not losing money.
Yeah.
But if I can rearrange the numbers to where they can see they are losing money, it's much easier to start focusing on where to act. If we were to look at a large corporation and say, oh, you're losing money, what should we do? I mean, everybody should be shrugging their shoulders. Yeah. But if you look at individual departments and divisions, you could really think oh, wait, we have 3 extremely profitable areas in one that's so poorly run that they're costing the rest of the company. so we can either fix it or drop it.
Yeah, absolutely. So it is relevant to know where, your performers are and their underperformers. There's so many different elements to this. It's just a wonderful treat to be sharing this with the My Future Business audience. I thank you so very much. Now, importantly, when people want to find you is, I guess, the first part of the question, where are they going to go? And secondly, where are they going to find your book?
Okay, so the best way to find anything that I'm working on is just to go to cassmerward.com.
Fantastic.
You will find there links to buy my book. You can get it through Amazon, barnesandnobles.com, Apple Books, Lulu, several other sites as well.
Mm-hmm.
And from there, actually, you will even have access to my video interview series, Influencing Entrepreneurs, and you can learn more about my work as a chief financial officer and a few education platforms that I use for the universities.
Yeah, thank you so much, CASSMER. Now, everybody who's on the call with this today, as is normally the case, I'm going to make a number of links back to CASSMER's website, his book, and everything else that you're going to need to access his video series, all of his trainings. CASSMER, thank you so very much for spending some time with me on the My Future Business show today.
Thank you very much, Rick.
Thanks for joining us today. If you enjoyed the call, then make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, share us with your friends, and book your spot on the show at myfuturebusiness.com/interviews. And if you're looking for solutions that will help grow your business, then visit myfuturebusiness.com/shop.